Hello everyone, I'm Drifting, and today I'm going to be talking about a relaxing web novel I recently read called Rise of the Otaku. The Chinese title is 在智崛起, and the author is written by Husan Xiaonong. Husan is just a location, Xiaonong just means someone from the countryside. The rough translation of the author's name is Husan Small Farmers. So Rise of the Otaku is a total of 600 chapters. Only around 410 have been translated. I'm not going to get into the reasons why. It was originally picked up by the translator Doggo Translations. They now go by Otaku Translation. The site is otakutl.blogspot. He originally translated a lot of this work, around 300 or 400 chapters, before he was issued a warning by TDN. So you can still read the raws on web novel. But yeah, Doggo Translation was the original translator who really made all this happen and, brought a lot of attention to Rise of the Otaku. So Rise of the Otaku is a magical fantasy, urban fantasy setting. Very much magical ability. Let's start with the description first. Zhou Yu, a reclusive otaku who did not like to go out of his house, was one day forced out of his house by a series of unexpected events. So Rise of the Otaku, as you can tell by the cover, is very much an old school style novel. Person on the cover, construction in the background, modern typeface. But it really reminds me of, older web novel titles like I Really Am a Superstar in terms of that wish fulfillment, urban fantasy setting. Now, it's not a pure urban fantasy entertainment genre that I usually read, like Disaster Artist, Full-Time Artist, Director of the Music Department, where it's much more about wealth accumulation, fame, chasing dreams, and making films. Rise of the Otaku, the main character Zhou Yu is unapologetically an otaku, right? He's a shut-in, he's a hikimori. He really enjoys his anime, comics, and games, ACG, right? His character is very much like a large child rather than adult. And his special ability, similar to like Hilda or Genki wa Sekai de Seri ni Ai Saremasu, similar the alternate title is Hoodlum Loved by Spirits or Yankees Loved by Spirit in a Different World. In that story, a delinquent can kind of see these magical spirits or fairies, and he can control magic, right? In Hilda, you can see this magical fantasy world. Rise of the Otaku has a very similar premise where he can see magical beings, right? Or like whether it's like a magical squirrel or pigeons or whatnot. It's this magical world only he can see. Very classic setting. But the reason why it's such a fun fantasy setting is because similar to a lot of like young adult books or magic fantasy, children have this active imagination, whether it's like imaginary friends or this hidden magical world that they explore. Rise of the Otaku really brings to the forefront a lot of those magical settings, right? Instead of being a wealth accumulation and entertainment web novel where he uses his anime, comics, and games knowledge to accumulate wealth, he's very much like pushes the business aspect to the side and is much more engaged with the system of, making anime, comics, and games, right? So in a lot of these Rise of the Otaku scenarios, we have an otaku, right, who's kind of not physically fit, maybe a little bit overweight, slowly becoming handsome and, gaining wealth and special abilities in like that urban fantasy, magical fantasy setting. Rise of the Otaku is much more about having fun, right? He builds aircraft carriers, he builds an amusement park similar to Amagi Brilliant Park. And there's this really funny scene at the beginning. His first pot of gold involves doujinshi, or fan fiction, of Togashi's Hunter x Hunter, right? So it's really funny to see a lot of these, entertainment aspects similar to I Really Am Superstar, which is really poking fun of itself and making just fun of culture and just being an entertaining, relaxing read. It's very much a slice of life where our main character Zhou Yu is like, he's like the leader or the king of the children, right? So he's just basically doing things for fun. He's giving back to his community, right? In a lot of Chinese web novels, a lot of characters go from the countryside to tier 3, tier 2, tier 1 cities. These are cities like Chengdu or Beijing, because in urban areas, that's where, people get paid more. They will go work in factories and get higher pay, right? And then there's recently been this trend of people from the urban cities going to the countryside to farm. It's because the countryside is seen as much more of cleaner air, more innocent people. It's less hustle and bustle. It's much more relaxing, right? So it's less, post-capitalistic world. So Zhou Yu is one of these salted fish who, after graduating from university, goes back to the countryside to farm. And then he goes on a lot of these adventures into the magical world and obtains a lot of these anime, comics, and games special abilities. So that's really the appeal of this web novel. It's very much a magical fantasy story where we see a lot of these fun magical characters, whether it's a magical squirrel, pigeons, tiny dragons. And we see kind of Zhou Yu just being this large kid, just having fun. And being lost in his own anime, comics, and games world. As I said before, this is very different from your classic entertainment urban fantasy, right? I really like Disaster Artist and director of the music department, but Rise of Otaku is much more slice of life, down to earth, and it's just a relaxing web novel. It's 600 chapters about a salted fish who's not really willing to do a lot of business stuff, but just engage in this anime, comics, and games magical world, kind of like this young adult fictional setting that I found really fun. So the Chinese title is, 在之崛起. It's written by Husan Xiaonong. Special thanks to Dago Translation for, being the first to translate this. 600 chapters. I don't know where you can find an official translation for it. Maybe there will in the future. But I found this a really fun web novel. So yeah, if you really enjoy slice of life and you're looking for something, I thought this was really cool. And that's really all I have to say. And that for Rise of Otaku. And we'll stop here.